makes a great star? Is it their talent, their work? Maybe it's the way they look, their style, their glamour, their fashion. Or perhaps it's their personal life, their relationships, their ups and their downs. It also doesn't hurt if they have one hell of an intriguing story, one full of drama, romance, heartbreak, and even murder. And to me, a perfect example of a star who exemplifies and embodies everything that I've just mentioned and so much more is LANA Turner. LANA Turner is everything I love about Hollywood, a manufactured illusion, someone with so many myths and tall tales attached to her name that it's really hard to separate fact from fiction. I also find her to be slightly overlooked when it comes to the great stars of Hollywood's golden age. I mean, yeah, she was a huge star. We're standing on one of the most famous streets in the world that has her name on it. Madonna even name checks her in her song Vogue, even though she mispronounces it as Lana. I also don't think, though, that Lana was a respected enough actress to ever be mentioned with Bette Davis or Katharine Hepburn. She wasn't as photographed as Joan Crawford, nor did she ever become as camp. And she certainly wasn't as low-key as Dietrich or Garbo. LANA Turner was her own kind of star, one who I think just has the perfect amount of everything. And whether you know a lot or nothing at all about LANA Turner, our tour is going to go way beyond her. There is a lot of Hollywood history on this adventure, and you're going to meet and hear about so many characters. Some names you'll recognize, and others you'll be learning about for maybe the first time. Lana is also going to share the spotlight with her daughter Cheryl Crane on this tour. If and when you ever see Cheryl's name alongside her mother's, it's in that notorious paragraph, the one that centers around the dead body found on the floor of Lana's bedroom in a Beverly Hills house that, oh, just you wait, it looks the exact same. You're not going to believe it. But to me, Cheryl Crane is much more than the incident that she's most remembered for, and I'd like to change that. I've also decided to start calling these docu-tours now. I first started doing them over on Instagram in my stories, so calling them story location tours made sense over there. However, I don't put them there anymore, and I've incorporated a lot more documentary-style storytelling into these, so I'm switching to Docu-Tour, which is going to take us on some pretty great Southern California locations in this story. A story in which a lot is going to be told directly from the sources themselves, pulled from the respective autobiographies of LANA Turner and Cheryl Crane. Sunset Boulevard is easily one of the most iconic streets in all of, well, dare I say, the world. And by the first time LANA Turner laid eyes on it, she was 15, and the summer of 1936 was coming to an end. It was the biggest city I had ever seen. Its wide streets lined with ornate stone buildings with bright, imposing signs, is what she later wrote. But on this particular September night, the teenager wasn't yet LANA Turner. She was Judy Turner. And sitting right next to Judy was her mother, Mildred, who was trying to stay as comfortable as possible due to the fact that she had a few broken ribs. Both mother and daughter were covered in bruises and scrapes from a car accident the night before in California's Central Coast, about 3 or 4 hours from here. Mildred and Judy, they had left their lives in Stockton, California, packed everything they owned into trunks and suitcases, and tied them to the top of a car in a ride that they were hitching with friends who were going to be passing through LA. It had been raining, and they slid into a ditch where the entire car ended up slowly turning over. Well, after a visit to the ER and an auto shop, they were all back on their way to LA less than 24 hours later as this rickety old mud-caked car rattled its way into the evening world of Hollywood. This building was here that night. Didn't look like this. They had passed an Art Deco gem that this once was, and Judy had no idea that her life would change in just a few months when she'd walk through its front doors. We'll be back. Mildred and Judy could have also looked out the window of their car and seen the old Hollywood motel across the street here. You may have recently heard about it because it burned down just a few months ago. 120 years worth of history up in flames. Most things from Judy and Mildred's very first night in Hollywood are long gone, but a couple places surprisingly still remain. And ironically, this old motel was featured in my favorite film, LA Confidential, a film that includes a brief scene where someone plays LANA Turner. And she could have never dreamed about one day being portrayed on screen because fame, well, it was the furthest thing from her mind when she arrived in LA that night. Hollywood was thriving in the 30s. The movie industry was booming, but show business just wasn't part of her dream. Fashion was, perhaps costuming. She did love going to the movies. She went to them often, but was mesmerized by what the actors were wearing, not what they were doing. She wasn't moving here to be a star. The real reason that they were leaving Stockton was that Mildred had a health condition that required a drier climate, and when her friend Gladys Taylor said, "Come on down to Hollywood, I have a spare room at my house," they jumped at the chance and hitched that ride. A ride that would end at one of the most famous intersections in Hollywood. An intersection where a moment in Judy's life would change her forever, and all exaggerations aside, it would be an encounter that would also change thousands and thousands of people's lives. And I am going to settle a decades-long debate, one that shouldn't even be happening. Some people think that it happened here on the northeast corner, and some think it was on the southeast corner where a fast food chain restaurant now sits. I'm going to tell you exactly where it was in a bit. And what isn't up for debate is that Mildred and Judy Turner's ride, it came to an end that night, right here at the intersection of Sunset Boulevard and Highland Avenue. Ask anyone who lives in LA today what they think of Sunset and Highland, and they'll tell you it's a traffic nightmare during rush hour. But in 1936, it led to nothing but fame and fortune for teenage Judy Turner. She and her mother, they unhooked their belongings from that beat-up car and sat on top of their luggage on the sidewalk that night as they waved goodbye to their travel companions. There was no way that newly beat-up car was going to make it up into the hills where Gladys Taylor lives, so they arranged for Gladys to pick them up right here in front of Hollywood High School, right where Judy was about to attend as a sophomore, a school that she had no idea would become part of her legacy, and bigger than her legacy, a myth that remains relevant today, a myth that includes an ice cream shop counter that sat right there, directly across the street from the school, a school that she was about to make world famous. Again, a lot happened in this young girl's life here at this intersection, and it all occurred in just a matter of months. There wasn't even much of a plan. Gladys's offer, it wasn't long-term. She herself rented a small house in Hollywood Heights, just up the street off of Highland here. I mean, this was Hollywood, but it was still the Great Depression, and being a single mom had to be just horrible. But Mildred did as much to hide her woes as best she could. She did hair, and she found herself a job working in a salon. She'd earned more here in LA than she did in Stockton. They were very, very poor there, sometimes eating crackers with milk for an entire week straight. But through their poverty, Mildred instilled quite a remarkable trait in Judy: manners and etiquette. Part of the reason they ate so poorly was because Mildred saved all of their money for nice clothes and accessories, expressing her strong belief that just because someone was poor didn't mean they had to appear that way. Class and elegance transcended beyond financial strain. They read aloud to each other, passages from books on proper etiquette. Judy paid particular attention to her posture and her poise, the way she carried herself. That's also what she noticed in the movies, how the stars dressed and carried themselves. Oh, she poured through Vogue magazine every time an issue came out. And in her spare time, she sketched out her own wardrobe designs. The students of Hollywood High, they were about to see a very fashionable 15-year-old classmate. One who was sort of forced to grow up a lot quicker than most kids, when murder entered her life for the first time at the age of 9. Her father, Virgil, he loved to gamble, and on the evening of December 13th, 1930, he joined a craps game in the basement of the San Francisco Chronicle. And after a successful winning streak, he wadded up a large sum of cash and put it in the sock of his left leg. Now, his fellow gamblers, they recalled that upon winning, he said he was going to use the money to buy his little girl a bicycle for Christmas. Well, she never got the bike or her father that Christmas. Virgil Turner's lifeless body, it was found in the early hours the following day, propped up against the side of a building at Minnesota and Mariposa Streets. I said San Francisco, right? That's where this happened, just over an hour from where his daughter Judy and Mildred were. His body, it was positioned to look like he was maybe sitting and just, leaning up against the building, sleeping one off. His left foot, it was completely exposed and bare, and gone, of course, was the wad of cash from his sock. His wallet was also empty, and missing was the diamond stick pin that he wore on the lapel of his coat. He was also known to wear the same watch every day, and that was nowhere to be found. Cause of death officially came from a cerebral hemorrhage from a blow to the head above his eye. And most people suspected, and it certainly sounds this way, that perhaps someone from the craps game beat him up and took the money, but nobody was ever caught, and his death still remains unsolved to this day. And the last time that Judy ever saw her father was in a coffin during his military-led send-off. From that moment on, it was just Mildred taking care of Judy, but now 6 years later, the roles were about to change, just as Judy's persona was about to change. This mural on the side of Hollywood High School's auditorium is called Portrait of Hollywood, and it was painted in 2002 by Eloy Torres. It's a bit confusing, though, because everyone who drives by just assumes that all of these people went to Hollywood High, but really only Dorothy Dandridge, Brandy, Lana, Lawrence Fishburne, Carol Burnett, Cher, Ricky Nelson, and Judy Garland were students here. Torres, he said that this was painted to represent diverse ethnic entertainers. And Rudolph Valentino, he's all the way to the right, he's on here because the school's mascot is a sheik. Hollywood High kids are the Sheiks, actually named in honor of Valentino's 1921 film called The Sheik. 1921 was also the year that Lana was born, Julia Jean Turner, on February 8th in Wallace, Idaho. Her mother, Mildred Frances Turner, she hailed from Arkansas, and she was just about to turn 17 when she and her 27-year-old husband, Virgil, welcomed their new auburn-haired daughter into the world, and they nicknamed her Judy right from the start. Virgil, he was just out of the Army, where he served as an infantry platoon sergeant during World War I, for which he had received several medals of valor. And little Judy, she spent the first years of her life dancing and singing around the record player with her mom and dad, implementing a lifelong love of music and dancing. But after Virgil's dry cleaning business failed, he packed up his wife and 6-year-old daughter, and that's when they headed west for San Francisco. And at first, they settled into a house in the nearby Stockton area where Virgil illegally made liquor. This was during the Prohibition era. And after getting caught and handed a light punishment, he found work loading cargo as a longshoreman. And Mildred, she worked as a nightclub hostess, among other jobs. Even back in Idaho, though, the couple's marriage, it was rocky and pretty much on the verge of collapse. Moving west, it didn't help the situation, as the two may have hoped, and the couple eventually separated. And as I told you last night, Virgil was murdered, and that was a traumatic event in little Judy's life, as you can imagine. And Virgil, he was a veteran, so his funeral, it was a big scene, very dramatic. And as basic as this sounds, I think that losing her father at such a young age had an impact on all of her relationships down the road. Mildred, she just couldn't raise Judy alone, so she actually sent her off to live with a family in Stockton, almost like a foster family. They weren't relatives, and they actually beat Judy. But once Mildred found out, she got her child the hell out of that house. And eventually, Judy attended Catholic school while Mildred stood on her feet all day doing hair, making money to make their ends meet. But that opportunity to move down here to LA knocked, and Mildred, she just rolled with it. Hollywood High School was actually established in 1903 in a small building over in East Hollywood, and just a couple years later, they moved over here where they built their campus, a lot of which still remains. Both the auditorium that we just saw and this one next to it still exist. There's a parking lot now where the kids once enjoyed a front lawn, but for the most part, both buildings are the same ones that Judy Turner saw when she enrolled as a 10th grader back in September of 1936. And only a few years before, in 1930, the school underwent a makeover and got some, well, what were then modern renovations. Obviously, since then, there have been many more upgrades and paint jobs and facelifts, but a lot of Hollywood High still looks like Judy's school. In the late 1940s, early 50s, when Carol Burnett was a student here, she was in just absolute awe to be walking the same halls that people like Joel McCrea, Alexis Smith, and LANA Turner had all walked in. It's all she thought about. But when Lana was a student, she didn't really have too many stars paving the way. Lana, she was the paver in terms of setting this blueprint, if you will, an idea, I suppose, of what it meant to be discovered and turned into a star. This was just a high school in Hollywood, whereas she would make it more Hollywood high. And I know I keep talking about this discovery, and we'll get to the details soon, but you have to remember that in 1936, there was no Hall of Fame in this school, and nobody knew what a Judy Turner was. I am a really big fan of the streamlined Art Deco design of this school and the front entrance here on Sunset Boulevard. It's exactly how it looked when Judy was a student here because, well, this entire portion of the school that runs along Sunset Boulevard, it was part of those early 1930s renovations. And, you know, for someone whose legacy is so attached to this high school, for someone who's painted on the side of it, for someone who has a star on their wall of fame, it might surprise you to learn that Judy only attended school here for just a few months. That's all. I mean, between this and my Carol Burnett series, I think I've spent more time at this school than Judy did. There is a really great photo of her here on campus, though. She's sitting in front of what used to be the administration building, but I believe that was demolished sometime in the 70s to make room for yet another parking lot here. going to add to my hype and make a really bold statement and say that the entire idea of an actor being discovered, it stems from what actually very famously happened to Judy Turner. It has become such a legendary story of show business. It launched generations of people coming to this town, coming to Hollywood, thousands, in hopes of having the same thing happen to them. Somewhere along the way, however, the story became a myth and the myth got skewed. For decades, it had been reported that Judy skipped class and was discovered sipping a milkshake at Schwab's drugstore, a very popular pharmacy with a soda counter on Sunset Boulevard. Sounds glamorous if you're not familiar enough with Hollywood to realize that Schwab's and Hollywood High School were, well, over a mile apart from each other, way too far to get a soda in between classes. That legend, though, it's been dispelled for a while now, and today there are two stories that you're going to likely encounter on how this all went down, but I'm going to squash one of them, hopefully for good, because I can prove exactly where Judy was discovered. Without calling anyone out or trying to discredit anyone's books or their websites or their socials, you'll see a lot of, shall we say, more current, more recent references to this whole thing taking place across the street at what used to be Curie's ice cream shop. This is a rumor that's been going around for several years now, and I really don't know why. They're all wrong. Sure, this was an ice cream shop with the sort of counter that's always depicted in this myth of hers. Also, several students of Hollywood, several sheiks were known to frequently skip class to hang out here, but if you're paying attention, Judy Turner wasn't your basic teenager. I mean, I'm sure she probably came here at some point, as did the key player who discovered her, but I'm going to post a couple photos when I edit this. Pay attention to what Curie's looked like inside, the high ceilings and all of the big open seating that Curie's offered, because, well, I found a photo that will prove why I believe without a doubt that Judy Turner simply, well, she just was not discovered here. I've read and heard a few people saying that they think the discovery happened at Curie's because LANA herself got the name wrong in her 1982 autobiography, LANA, the Lady, the Legend, and the Truth. Ooh, what a title. In it, she wrote that she hated typing class, hated it. So in October, 1 month into her new school, she skipped class and ran across to what she said was catacorner from Hollywood High to the Top Hat Cafe, and that she was sipping a Coke at the counter, not a milkshake like the legend suggests, because, well, those were expensive, and Cokes, they were cheap. Well, she actually did get the name wrong in her book, because the Top Hat Cafe, it was never here. It was actually several blocks east on Vine Street, and it was a very popular place for a while. What was here, though, was the Tops Cafe. I mean, come on, so she got the name slightly off. Cut the lady, the legend, and the truth a break. Drives me nuts that there are people doubting the author herself just because of an easy name slip. But she did go on to dispel the Schwab's myth in her book and shared what she believed to be its origin. She said that just as her career was taking off in the movies, Hollywood columnist and radio personality Sidney Skolsky was sitting at Schwab's counter when a young, eager actress came running in, demanding to know which bar stool was LANA Turner sitting at the day she got discovered. Well, without thinking, Sydney pointed to one and said, "That one." And that is how easy a quick lie turned into such a big legend. This myth that he created, this myth that he made up, it even led him to writing a popular regular column in Photoplay magazine called From a Stool at Schwab's. Well, from then on, Schwab's became the place that actors would visit in hopes of being discovered. Years later, it even appeared in 1950's Sunset Boulevard, playing itself, and in 1955, Lucy mentions getting discovered at Schwab's in an episode of I Love Lucy, but it simply didn't happen there. It happened here, and I'll prove it. So 1 year after her discovery, a publicity stunt took place to celebrate her showbiz anniversary by bringing LANA back to the place where it all happened. It was in the newspapers and magazines, although none of them, very strangely, ever mentioned by name where it happened. However, I found some photos from this shoot, and if you look closely, the paneling in the cafe, it matches the paneling in a newspaper article that I found that shows the outside of the Tops Cafe when it was closing down shortly after this occasion. You can see that the walls, the ceilings, they look nothing like Curie's. Not only that, I found another photo that shows LANA at the counter with what appears to be a menu next to her and some other actors who her studio thought were up-and-comers. But if you look closely at the menu, it matches the menu that I tracked down from the Tops Cafe. Bingo! It's clearly their menu in the photo, and she was clearly at the Tops Cafe 1 year later, because that's where she was sitting that day in October when Manuel, who was working that day, approached Judy to tell her that a well-dressed man, a regular customer, wanted her permission to come over and speak to her. Manuel, he vouched for him, so Judy said sure. The man got up, business card in hand, and cut right to the chase, asking, "Would you like to be in the movies?" Judy very famously replied, "I don't know. I'd have to ask my mother." With that, he handed her his business card, saying, "Well, have your mother call me," as he left for his office down the street. Judy, she put the business card in her pocket and returned to class. Well, after school, she casually mentioned the encounter to her mother, but didn't make much of it. Mildred, she was just so exhausted from standing on her feet all day at the beauty salon, so she brushed the whole thing off. No interest whatsoever. It was their housemate, Gladys, who, overhearing the conversation, grabbed the business card saying, "Do you know who this is? Billy Wilkerson owns the Hollywood Reporter. Call him first thing in the morning." The most vital part of this story isn't really where it happened. It's that Judy's mother, Mildred, actually followed through with Billy Wilkerson's request. Took some convincing on Gladys's part, but Mildred, she called Billy's office to set up an appointment for her to bring her teenage daughter to his office for a meeting. It was probably even a shock to him. I'm sure he gave out his business card to several girls using that same line, but I'm sure very few of them actually called his bluff. Well, whether he was serious or not, the Turners, they now had a meeting right here, just a block away from the high school, at his office, the headquarters of the Hollywood Reporter, and where we began our walk last night. William Richard Wilkerson, he had only bought this property 5 years earlier in 1931, back then a single-story masonry. with the intent to run his business ventures here as well as the Insider magazine that he launched in September of 1930. The Hollywood Reporter took off instantly. There were Hollywood gossip magazines, ones that catered to the lives and stories of movie stars, but this one focused on the behind the scenes, the business deals, the financial side of showbiz. There was a huge need for this, and almost 100 years later, it's still a strong presence in Hollywood. As Hollywood was devouring the pages of his magazine, the money he was making allowed him to hire architects Douglas Hanold and George Vernon Russell to revamp the building in the 1930s, adding an entire building behind it and creating this streamlined Art Deco front that still remains today. And in addition to the Reporter, Billy owned the successful Cafe Trocadero on the Sunset Strip and would later own one of the most alluring Sunset Strip nightclubs called Ciro's. Not only that, but he'd go on to open the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas, where he had close business ties with mobster Bugsy Siegel. There's a restoration project in place, supposedly, although it seems to have been stalled for a few years now. We are looking at an LA historic cultural monument, declared so in 2017. Let me repeat that. We're looking at an LA historic cultural monument. And this is its condition. It's been empty for well over a decade now. The Hollywood Reporter actually stayed here for an astounding 74 years. Billy Wilkerson passed away at 71 in 1962, the magazine outlasting all of his LA business ventures. His widow, Titchy Wilkerson, she took over and ran the Hollywood Reporter until she sold it to Billboard magazine for a whopping $26 million in 1988. Part of her deal, though, entitled her to remain the editor for a while, and the Hollywood Reporter lasted here until moving from this building to their current one on Wilshire in 2005, the year after 77-year-old Titchy died. Following their move, the LA Weekly moved in. Where are my LA Weekly fans? My LA Bible for years and years and years. A free newspaper magazine. It was started in 1978, and it came out every Thursday. I mean, before the internet, this is where we learned about everything that was happening and going on around Los Angeles. Absolutely crucial and essential to read the LA Weekly. I can't imagine my 1990s Hollywood life without it. They left here, though, in 2013, and this place, it's just been eroding and rotting ever since. Back in 1936, when Mildred brought her young daughter Judy here, this place was called the Sunset House. Billy Wilkerson, he was really business hungry, and in addition to having his Hollywood Reporter offices, he set up a men's shop right out front here. They called them haberdasheries back then, a word I'd really like us to all try and bring back. Haberdashery, so fun to say. A store specializing in menswear, men's accessories, wallets, scarves, ties, belts, cufflinks. Not only that, but this store had a barber shop too. The Sunset House, it wasn't as successful as his other LA business ventures, and it didn't last too long. The Hollywood Reporter became so big anyway that it didn't really matter. Plus, Wilkerson ended up needing all the space to run that giant publication. During this time, he was married to an actress named Billy Seward. They were married from 1925 to 1938. She appeared in a handful of movies, but despite being married to someone who ran a publicity machine, just couldn't drum up enough to become a star. Instead, Mr. Wilkerson, he seemed to direct that energy towards other people, like Judy. She and her mother were now sitting across from him in his office, eager to hear what he had to say, which really wasn't all that much. For a man who boasted for the rest of his life that he discovered the LANA Turner, he basically just said, "Look, I'm not a producer, I'm not a director. I personally can't get you work in the movies, but I really think you have a shot here, and I want you to meet with someone who I think can." Now, I mean, look, obviously connections are everything in this town, and Wilkerson was crucial, but really who kind of should get the credit for discovering her was the man who Billy insisted she meet with, Zeppo Marx, as in the world-famous comedy titans, the Marx Brothers. Zeppo, he was the youngest brother. He acted in the first 5 Marx Brothers movies from 1929 to 1933, including, the big ones: Animal Crackers, Monkey Business, Horse Feathers, Duck Soup. They were just absolutely huge, giant. They were on the cover of Time magazine in 1932, just on top of the world. But the next year, Zeppo, he traded it all in to open his own talent agency. The building where Zeppo's agency was used to sit on Sunset Boulevard, a couple miles west of us, but it no longer exists. It was a pretty successful agency, too. In addition to representing his brothers, Zeppo would also represent Barbara Stanwyck, who we'll hear about down the road. And soon after Billy Wilkerson sent her his way, Zeppo Marx would be adding 15-year-old Judy Turner to his roster of movie-seeking clients. That was really all that Billy Wilkerson did for her, though, connect her to Zeppo. She was always very grateful to him, though, and the two would remain in each other's lives all throughout the rest of Billy's life, and he'll even show up again in our story. The legend of LANA Turner's discovery, it also seems to embrace this idea that she was plucked directly from a cafe and dropped right onto a movie set. Hardly, though. Zeppo, he set his new client, Judy, up with various agents in his office, and they paraded her around town to casting offices and studios to no avail for 9 months. Mildred lost faith in this whole notion, regretting the meeting that she took here with Billy, thought they were all wasting her daughter's time. Judy, she was just going with it, meeting whoever, whenever. There's also more to the myth versus reality of this whole discovery. Everyone in LANA Turner's life, including her own daughter Cheryl, said that she did background extra work during these 9 months. Zeppo and all the agents apparently wanted her to get used to being on a film set, seeing how it all worked. Well, the biggest of these movies she supposedly worked as an extra on was the original A Star is Born in 1937, starring Janet Gaynor. There are many crowd scenes in that film, and it's impossible to identify most of the extras, so we'll probably never know for sure, but Lana in her own book said, "No way, no how did I ever do extra work." Well, whether she did or not, the persistence of her new agency paid off when Judy Turner was introduced to the actual man who would change her professional life, a real working Hollywood director, one who even worked at a real major movie studio. Things were about to finally get good. Real good for Judy Turner and her mother.